Yacht A, welcome to Navajo Sage Weaver Tarot's channel. Welcome. Today I am going to do Aries reading. Aries, I am going to do your reading. I already set out some cards for you. I have some lesson cards, animal cards, and I pulled the rebellion card. See what kind of rebellion our Aries are getting themselves into during this reading. So I have combined five different tarot decks. All the decks will be linked down below in the description box. Just want to remind everybody that this is a general reading. This is not a personal reading. You may not resonate with the whole thing. You may not resonate it with, with it at all, and that's okay. Just take what resonates with you and leave the rest. And also just, um, enjoy the reading. All right, Aries, let's start your reading. I'm going to shake the gourd and we'll get started. All right, Aries. Shuffle a couple times in the air. Spirits and guides, what lesson message do you um, want Aries to know at this time? What message do you want Aries to know at this time, spirits and guides? One card, please. We have acceptance. All right. Just going to give one shuffle, one air shuffle. And spirits and guides, what animal message wants to come out for Aries at this time? What animal message wants to come out for Aries at this time? Spirits and guides. All right, let's do a air shuffle. Spirits and guides, can I get one rebellion card for Aries? All right, Aries. It looks like we are starting off with the lesson of acceptance. And it says, I am learning to accept things that I cannot change. And then your animal spirit is mouse spirit, which is 40. And the mouse spirit says, tend to the smallest things. Okay. And then I pulled a rebel card and it says, the world needs your power. Use your voice. Just do not use it for dumb poop. It doesn't say poop, but it says the other word because this is YouTube. You gotta keep it PG. Um, and then it says, you are talented and effing amazing. So you are talented and effing amazing and use your voice. The world needs your power. Do not use it for dumb poop. So, all right. So, Aries, I've already pre-shuffled and pulled out and laid out your cards. I have a 24 spread here, and I am just going to put this here. All right. So, Aries, um, I have four rows, um, and six cards in each row. And for, mm, I guess the reason why I picked this spread was, one, the four directions. So, um, however, this, this spread, however it finds you, but I have a different interpretation. So that's how I look at it is each row is a direction and 24, is two plus four or six. So kind of went on that aspect. So in our first row, we have the Temperance, the Queen of Feathers, the Three of Wands, the Tower, the Daughter of Wands, the Queen of Cups. The second row, we have the Nine of Wands, um, the Eight of Pentacles, the Two of Shells, the Ten of Wands, the Ace of Pentacles, the High Priestess. We have the Hierophant in the third row. We have the Hangman. We have the Four of Pentacles, the Four of Swords, the Eight of Feathers, and the Three of Wands. In the last row, we have the Mother of Pentacles, the Four of Cups, the Tower, Justice, the Ten of Cups, and the Ace of Pentacles. All right. So Aries, our lesson is acceptance, right? So maybe there's some sort of um, combination of, accepting that, there are things you cannot change, right? And then, the mouse spirit is saying, tend to the smaller stuff. Maybe the stuff that you're not really paying attention to, the smallest details, and then also, Spirit wants to know that you are talented and amazing. So here we're starting off with the Temperance here. And the Temperance energy um, s- speaks to me about um, a balance, right? Um, a sacred balance, maybe, here at the beginning, right? At the beginning of this tarot reading, we're starting off with the Temperance. And Spirit is probably telling you, slow down, right? Do not rush into making some sort of decision. Especially like if you're uh kind of blending, right? If you, all these colors here, to me, they're like some sort of combination of blending, blending colors, fire, you got the water, right? Coming down into the fire. So you're blending some sort of elements. Um, maybe maybe you've come to this path, right? And so you're blending, your two paths, or you are blending two projects, or blending two identities, right? So you're combining something here. And 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 Spirit is, wanting you to, give, you know, to allow them to have space, right? When you're combining, like when you're combining two things, right? Two elements. So you have one element here and one element here, and this element is in its own space, and then this element's in another space, um, right? And then when you blend them, right? Then you're blending and you're creating, you're giving it another space to create, right? For instance, let's use this flower vase here, right? So the flowers were outside, right? They were they were in their own space. And then here I come and cut the flowers, right? And then I bring it inside. So I take it from the outside space and I bring it inside. And then so the flowers was in the ground, and now I'm taking it and creating a different space for it, and then I put it in the water and in the vase, and now it's sitting on this, on my table. So I, you know, took two different elements and then I combined it with one, um, and creating a different type of space. And so the temperance for me is kind of like that. And the reason why I say that is because, the colors, you got the reds and then you got the blues coming and creating this green line. And then here you got the water dripping into the fire and so that's how I see the temperance. Um and then we move on to the Queen of Feathers. And here it says preparation and then truth. So, um, I guess like from what I see is that um, when this card, the Queen of Feathers, which is the Queen of Swords, right? And maybe when you combined the two right elements and then going into this energy here, you detach some sort of, emotion, right? As you can see, the bat is surrounded by this, environment here, but it's not attached like here is attached. So at some point, um, the energy change. And when the energy change here, uh, there's this detach, you know, emotion, maybe to see clarity, to see it from a different perception, right? A higher, so you went from the ground and now you're flying, so you're getting a different perception. So um, you're seeing clarity, you're seeing, truth through, you know, you're seeing truth from a different, what do you call that? A different um, view, right? So you're instead of being on the ground, you're up above looking at whatever you're trying to create here at this moment. And so um there's, you're creating also, some sort of, you know, um you're, like here, there's like some sort of swirl, right? So you're creating when you're swirling something, right? When you see like for instance a tornado, it has a swirl and then, it just kind of goes, but it has its boundaries because it's only contained you know, in this like the tornadoes contain in a funnel, right? And when it moves, it has boundaries. It's not, you know, just all over the place like rain, right? Rain is all over the place, but uh like a tornado is not. It has a control and then but it still has this movement that, can be disruptive, right? It can change the whole environment. And so that's what I see here with the Queen of Feathers is some sort of boundary, that you're creating and then, it's kind of like having this overreaction like a tornado, right? Because tornadoes when they form and then, in its path, it just destroys, right? It destroys so that way, um, you know, um, it can recreate in a different form after the storm leaves, right? And so that's what I kind of see here. Um, and and then also, using your intuition, doing this, um your higher self, connecting, with spiritual beings. And then you have the three wands here. Um, so you're looking, right? So you know, after all this movement here, right? And then now you're looking, maybe you're looking at, the aftermath of it here. Maybe you're, um, maybe, right? Now you have the water and the water is here, right? And then the fire and, your wands have fire. And so that kind of speaks to me that you planted, right? Those are, here you were nourishing something. You're getting two elements together. Then you just kind of did your tornado thing, right? With the Queen of Feathers, trying to get a perception and the truth out of it. And then after that, after everything settled, right? After the storm went through, then your elements laid itself down, like planting a seed, so your wands, they're different, they're different levels of consciousness, right? So this is a higher conscious, which is to me is connected to this element here, right? That could have been that element, right? Um, or um, but these are, to me, I see these are seeds that, after the aftermath, they kind of just planted themselves there and, kind of came out of the ground, um, not like a plant, but with some sort of energy, right? That creates, you know, um, that creates some sort of motion, right? You're thinking, um, your not case, your what you think in your mind, right? The same thing here, maybe, this is planting or nourishing, right? Your intuition, your intellect, and then when you do that, then the perception and the truth of clarity wants to come in. And then now you're looking, your um your vision, you know, it has expanded more, right? So for me, that's kind of what I see here. And then we move into the tower, right? The tower, allowing things to kind of fall, if you see here, right, it's kind of like that fire color, right? That red. So allowing the flame to, fall, allowing it to disrupt, right? Um, allowing it to maybe release, here it says release and uh, revelation. So the tower. So releasing um, something, right, that might be disturbing or might be coming. These energies are, like I said, they're it's a general reading. So however, you're putting yourself out there, Aries, it may come to you or it may be destructive, but you're releasing something. There's a revelation to this tower here. And then, you know, um, and then also trusting the tower to fall. And when the tower kind of just, breaks, right? You you're it's um it's trusting it. It's trusting that, at this time the tower's falling because, whatever, the disruption was is no longer needed in your path, right? Um so that's what I see for the tower. And then here with the Daughter of Wands. Um, and the Daughter of Wands is like the Page of Wands, right? So, um, so now, you know, if you see your flames turned into because you allowed and you released something, right? And now they flourish. They become some sort of floral, right? So, um, so after the tower, the page, right? The daughter, she come it, they come in. This energy comes in to bring some sort of rebirth, right? So now your seed, whatever combined it here is now creating, right? Created some sort of um spark for you. Because this is the wand. And then um so it's bringing it's rebirthing like curiosity. It's rebirthing your inspiration, right? Having adventure in your life. And also allowing your childlike um uh childlike uh soul, right, to kind of re-enter. Maybe you were so serious. And so now with the page here, you're allowing your childlike characteristic come out into this environment here after the tower. And then we have the Queen of Cups. So the Queen of Cups speaks to me like, you know, when I look at the Queen of Cups here, it's kind of like, the anchor, right? The anchor of your passion because, the queen, she's a nurturer, she's somebody um who uh doesn't react, right? Her response is not reactive. Um she um she being the cup, right, is emotional. So there's some sort of emotional um, healing in that, you know, um, because the Queen of Cups, she's a healer. She uses her heart, she uses her emotions, she nurtures and she's intuitive too because she's has the water around and the moon. So, here, she reminds you to, you know, you know, look out for your own waters, right? Your own emotions before you give it to somebody else, right? So, and so Aries. So the first row here from what I'm getting is that there's some sort of acceptance learning here, things that you just have to accept and you cannot change. And so there's balancing, awakening, breaking through, right? Reopening, you know, um, and then um, kind of, the two queens here. You got the Queen of Feathers, which is the Queen of Swords. She's kind of she'll use her sword, she'll cut you off. Where- Whereas the Queen of Cups, she'll nurture, she listens to her intuition before, kind of cutting you off versus the Queen of Cups kind of just cut you off. She's not gonna deal with that type of, energy. So, so having the two queens you know, and then, the tower, in between, is um, the Queen of Swords, having wisdom and then compassion, right? And then um being able to hold a space to allow this tower to come in. And then, you got the Three of Swords and the Page, you know, kind of nudging you, right? Because here, you're looking, right? So it's kind of nudging you and saying, hey, Aries, look forward, right? Because that's what you're doing. You're looking forward. And then, you know, but then, looking forward and then the tower comes in, gives you clarity, right? And then the page, healing, you know, um, and bringing that um, curiosity, that childlike. So sparks of spirit, coming through, your sparks, creating something. So that's what I have for you for that, and that that top of um, the first row there. And then, um, also, you know, um, another way uh, to look at it is, the um, the Temperance and the Queen of Feathers and the Three of Wands, um, telling you to uh, anchor yourself and like a spiritual and emotional, right? Because you got the water and the fire, you got the water and the fire, right? And then, you know, trying to, get truth and perception. So you're kind of like allowing yourself to, you know, your vision to kind of go way beyond, the present moment. But um, but with intention. You have intention. You're not wasting it. You are preparing for some sort of, transformation, and you're not running from it. So you're allowing yourself, right? You're having acceptance in your transformation here. And then, here, you can also look at it from the Tower and the Daughter and the Queen of Cups. A sudden shift, right? Because the Tower just brings everything, bring it back down to just the foundation. So, spirit is here giving you some sort of shift, in your life. Um, and dismount dis uh dismounting, right? Dismounting, is that how you say it? The 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 negative thoughts, right? The false security, you know, um, you're trying to, you know, stay in that mindset of like curiosity, right? But then also trying to soothe yourself emotionally, with this tower being here. So the tower, is kind of like um, cracking cracking open your intuition, right? Not just the structure, but it's opening. It's allowing your intuition to be open. Um, so yeah, so I would say, there's, kind of like that. There's trying to find the anchor, right? And then a shift coming into it. And then now you're nourishing that with acceptance. And then because of that, you're using the mouse spirit, because you're probably tending to the small stuff, and when you start doing that, things start moving for you. So, and then um, in the second row here, we have the Nine of Wands, the Eight of Pentacles, the Two of Shells, and the Ten of Wands, the Ace of Pentacles, and the High Priestess. So, so maybe, maybe there's some sort of struggle, right? And that's, you know, uh, that's coming in. Um, you know, I see like, the spider web looking like, there's some sort of struggle there, right? And then the Ten of Wands, If you look at the image there, it has a lot of chaos, right? So, and then and then you have the Ace of Pentacles here, right? Right, which is uh, coming, a plant breaking through this chaos. So you're having some sort of breakthrough of some sort. And then, the High Priestess, she just kind of makes you look at things in more of a deeper, like a deeper, um, and a deeper interpretation, right? Um, so, so I'd say, um, the Nine of Wands, um, is letting you know like something's almost over, right? Something that you've been battling with is almost done. And, you know, uh, you're, if you see there's some sort of um, barrier, so you're holding ground for some reason, Aries. You're holding ground, um, but um, Spirit saying don't give up. Don't let the past wounds, when you're holding this ground, don't let the past wounds affect you, you know. And then you have the Eight of Pentacles here. Um, and you know, this here, the Eight of Pentacles talks about like, somebody who's showing up, right? Even when it's hard, you know, um, because when you go sometimes like, for instance, this kind of came to me like when you're going outside, right? And you don't see the spider web, but you walk right into it. And it's just once that spider web kind of gets on you, right? It feels like there's um like it's hard for you to kind of get out of it, like that feeling, it's just once you walk through it, you're trying to, clean yourself off and you still feel maybe the web on you in some way and you're like, um, trying to wipe it off and it takes some time, it doesn't just come off easy like, there's some a lot of, wiping your face. It's kind of sticky, right? I mean, if you think about like uh spider web, and plus, the spider, puts a lot of work into their web, you know, and then so there's maybe some work in it, right? And then the creativity that comes behind how this spider makes its effort to make it just so like, if you ever look at a spider web, it's very beautiful and has its, its own creativity, but then also it's very spiritual too, because you got this really thin, right? This thin fiber that can hold within wind and rain and and can endure a lot of like tension to it without really you know breaking so easy, but then also it's it traps, it um I'm sure if a fly or a bug got on it, I'm sure it's not a really good feeling, um, it feels, when I get stuck in or when I run into a spider web, it's not a good feeling for me. It doesn't feel, it feels kind of weird, it feels like it's everywhere. Um, so and there's something in that maybe. Um, and maybe, just looking at your own, right? Your own creativity, your own craft, if you do crafts. I have a hard time saying craft now, since um, I have a different understanding of art and crafts. So whatever you create, right? And then also just trusting the process, you know? That's really hard to do is allows, um, the energy to work, to go through these stages, and then being able to trust, you know, the process of, what you're creating, what you're trying to combine, right? And then you have the two of shells, and it says union and harmony. And, you know, and the two of shells are it's like here, some sort of partnership, right? Um, some sort of maybe support, right? That you, um, you know, maybe support your growth, right? Support your creativity, um, support um, your spiritual growth, so some sort of some sort of support coming in for you with and then also, you know, spirit is saying, you know, that you don't have to go through this alone. You know, we don't have to go through anything alone. The hardest thing that I've come across is asking for help. And a lot of times, when I do ask for help, it seems like things come or things start moving more easy, right? When I start accepting the things I can't change. So I can change the fact that I can ask for help. Um, but I cannot change what the person will say to me. I just have to have acceptance, right? And then, also the mouse spirit here. Look at the smaller things first before you take down the big things, just like if you're if you're organizing, like your room or a space, right? Um, Sometimes just opening a drawer, right? A junk drawer and pull out that junk drawer and lay out everything out of that junk drawer, right? Rather than maybe, um, moving something big, like, what can we move? Oh, if you move the dresser as a whole, right? And instead of starting something like that, like start something small, start something like a junk drawer and and lay it out and look at it and see the things that you have in there, and get rid of what no longer you need and and keep the things that you need and but also, Spirit saying here, like you can ask your friend for help. You can even ask Spirit for help. Like for instance, maybe it's hard for you to open that junk drawer, and maybe it's hard for you to uh look at it. And so, ask Spirit, ask your guides, hey, I need help. I cannot clean that drawer for some reason, but I need to clean it, you know? Start there, start asking your guides, it doesn't have to be people. So, sometimes I think uh like the reading sometimes we think it has to be something big when it just can be the smallest things, and then we go, um, you know, so we're spirit saying, don't do this all alone, you know. And then you go into the Ten of Wands, maybe you're doing too much, right? Maybe that junk drawer's too much, right? And spirit saying, all right, so maybe you don't need that one, and maybe you need that one. So maybe you need to make two different piles, right? What you're going to keep and what you're not going to keep, right? Or maybe what what you want to keep, what you don't want to keep, and maybe pile, right? Or maybe a donation pile too. So, So that's kind of like how I see this Ten of Wands coming in is, shed what, like get rid of what no longer you need, even though it may be a little bit overwhelming, right? Get spirit involved, get a friend involved, look at it now and start making, your different piles. That way you can start separating them. And then, you know, um, and also, this can be, the wands can, also can be a reflection of what you're carrying, maybe right? Maybe in her junk drawers, you got, some habits in there. You got some guilt, right? Some fear. You don't want to get rid of that. Got guilt because maybe that belonged to somebody that was important to you, and but you really don't need it. So there's, some sort of like emotions in that in some way. That that you're carrying in that junk drawer, and that's why it's hard to move that energy. um and then another example too would be like I have dogs. So I've always had dogs since I, you know, as a was a child. So I have a lot of understanding about different dogs. And one thing about dogs is that, they shed, right? And if you let their shed overtake your home, like if you don't clean it daily, right? Um, I have to sweep my floors 3 times when I get up in the morning, sometime throughout the day, and then before I go to bed. Um, and but I create that routine for myself because I can understand that if I leave that dog hair for one day, the next morning when I get up, boy, I will tell you, I have a hard time even having a thought of sweeping that. And then the hair just starts, collecting energy. It's like a stagnant energy, right? And then it creates smell if it gets wet, and then there's just hair everywhere, and then it's on your clothes, in your hair, in your mouth, you're eating it. So it can be very overwhelming sometimes. And so that's kind of what I get to like, if you look at the Ten of Wands, kind of like that, and then also the energy that it can bring, it can, you know, um, just create a lot of negativity, because, when your hair falls out, it's has this attraction in some way. Even like when you brush your own hair, right? And you see it in your comb. And sometimes when you don't clean out your brush, and you just keep using it, it has a weird kind of energy on it, And I don't know. I have a weird thing about, seeing hair and brush for some reason. Just, ugh. But anyways, we'll move on to the to the Ace of Pentacles. And so the Ace of Pentacles here is like, spirits like saying, hey, you know, you planted your seeds, right? You're nourishing it, right? You're allowing it to take its process. You ask for help. And now, a new foundation forms, right? Um, Spirit gifts you, spirit hands. This is spirit's hand, you know, your guide's hand, giving you a gift or an opportunity, right? Or maybe some sort of grounding insight if you look at the environment, right? Because it's coming from the ground. So it's, some sort of ground insight that's kind of is being offered here with this Ace of Cups here. I mean, yeah, the Ace of Pentacles, sorry. And then, but also Spirit saying, in order to have this Ace of Pentacles, you need space, right? you need space to nourish this, you know? So you got to look at your space and clear, clear around this plant here, so that way, this, whatever this gift is, this opportunity, this insight, this offering that, your creator's giving you, you gotta make sure there's no overgrowth, it doesn't get entwined, like a like grapevines, I have one outside and, you know, um, when I cut it back in the fall, right? After it grows its fruit, I cut it back. And then in the around this time, it starts creating, its vines and stuff. But I have to kind of push their vines, right? So that way it can kind of stay in a certain place and it doesn't overtake or doesn't kill any of the other plants around. So something like that, with this energy here with the Ace of Pentacles, um, making a path, for your growth and then we have the High Priestess here. And the High Priestess, to me, the energy is like you already know, right? Because the High Priestess is in touch with the her intuition, right? You have the moon here. And also is um you know connected, right? Um you have a veil here and so, again, you got your fire burning here and here and here, right? Let's look at it. So, maybe Spirit is kind of suggesting you to, pay attention to your dreams, right? To signs and synchronicities. Um, Spirit is giving you a nudge, um, uh, um, so, um, yeah, so listening and intuitive, you know, um, for the truth, right? For you have truth, the preparation, gaining that clarity, right? Now you're seeing how your fire, how it's when you're nourishing it, taking time, you know, asking for help, being able to, find categories for it. Then when you do that, here's the gift, the opportunity, the insight that's given to you. And now, you know, um, y- paying attention, you know, to to your truth, what is the message really saying to you, Um, you've working really hard, right? You're creating hard work through this you know through this level here, and now you honor your endurance, and you're learning, you kind of lean into partnership, creating space, for renewal, for truth, right? um you're listening to your inner voice to, right, to guide you to the next direction. Um, so time to plant, sorry, time to plant and accept, look at the smallest things, and and take action. Um, so You have the Nine of Wands and the Eight of Pentacles and the Two of Shells and the Ten of Wands, it's like you're holding too much, but Spirit saying, look at it. It's really chaotic, right? If you look at this here, it looks way too much, but Spirit is saying, um, there's beauty in it right here, you know? There's delicacy, right? These wands are very delicate. This spider web is very delicate, right? And then, lit, with the two of shells, um, harmony, bringing, um, bringing that love, right? Uh, Bringing that love in so you can shine it in the dark and then you can see what all of those things in your junk drawer are about. And then, um, so you're devoting yourself to something, right? A devotion to something, because, yeah, it's a little chaotic, overwhelming, ask for help, shine light on it, you know, you're going to do something about this. And then you have, the Ace of Pentacles here and the High Priestess, new offerings, right? Um, but you must slow down, right? And listen to your intuition. Trust your sacred knowing. Um, so, you know, this is kind of like it's not allowed, it's not noticeable, right? Because you got to put in the work in this chaos here. Got to put in the work. And so it's like, through through all this, right? You got all this here looks like that. And, spirits kind of like whispering, hey, Aries, here. If you clean out the clutter, start shining it with love, right? You might be able to see this gift and this opportunity here. Um, and trust the knowing in it that, you'll find a gift. You never know, you might find something in your junk drawer, you know, that you didn't even know was there. And, it could help you. So, and then, spirits, your rebel side is telling you, like you're talented and amazing, and so spirit wants you to um trust yourself. There is a beginning, something something being handed to you by spirit, but you gotta look and you gotta ask for help through this chaos. And then we have the Hierophant, um, the Hangman, the Four of Pentacles, the Four of Swords, the Eight of Feathers, and then the Three of Wands here. And for me, the Hierophant speaks like maybe uh, some sort of surrender, right? Surrendering the um, the Hierophant um, speaks of like, returning to something, right? Returning to like maybe some sort of something sacred, right? That opens the door to a different realm here. And if you see this crow, it has its feathers here, but because their key is here, it it opened in a different realm, and then it's not black anymore, and so now the feathers our weight around here. And maybe you have people, you know, seeing you in this energy here, right? And maybe you're not seeing yourself in that energy, you know? May, maybe because, you haven't got past this, you know? Um, but, and you get the high priestess and then, the Hierophant. And so the Hierophant is, some sort of sacred knowledge, right? Your ancestors, maybe giving you in this partnership, right? Maybe this is your ancestors here, dropping the key and you're like, don't know what to do. Don't know what to do with this key, Um, and so, after this clutter, you cleared the space, you trusted your intuition, right? That was the right plant, that was giving that gift to you. And spirit is, now it's not the hand, it's come out and dropped that key. So it's a key to something, right? And so now, you know, asking yourself, like, you know, looking at it with, curiosity, what do you believe now? Like you probably didn't believe that if you asked for help that, through this chaos, you know, that you wouldn't get here. And now you're like kind of asking yourself, what do I believe now? What's the truth here? Um, so, this higher frontier is challenging your outdated, belief, So what used to be, right? No longer, because you got a tower, it crumbled. But what your old belief was, and spirit made you look at it from a different perspective, right? Perception, I should say. And you had to release and then, bring in union. And then now, you know, it's challenging, Spirit says, here's the key to a new door, you know, um, and challenges you to leave your old belief behind, your old spiritual, you know, and accept, right? And look at it from, look at it the way a mouse would look at it, from the smallest things. And then you have the hangman here. This is like um, if you look, she's suspended, right? Um, Down. And I don't know about you, but when I kind of put myself in a position where I hang myself down, right? Or maybe you're doing that yoga kind of, where I forgot what they call that. Where you use like a bungee, like some sort of cloth and you kind of, use it to do some sort of stretching in midair. And so um when I get into a position like that, I get that rush, right? Because the blood is going to my head. So I get some sort of rush. And then also too, the hangman's looking at it from a different perception, right? Seeing things, shifting your perception, I should say. Breaking through, you know, um, so this is like kind of you're coming out of your spiritual cocoon, right? Can look at it in that aspect, you know, creating that web, right? Asking spirit, for help, getting out of it, boom, shooting out, coming out of your cocoon, shifting your perception. And then you have the Four of Pentacles here. And the Four of Pentacles, um, uh, is letting go, right? Um, letting go of stinky thinking. Um, Even isolating, right? You're not the pentacles are not, together. They're kind of like, in their direction, right? And so they're kind of isolating, even though they're connected, right? You have this is still connected, but kind of, have isolation in their own space, and also like can talk about fear, right? The Four of Pentacles. So, what 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 fears, right? What are causing, them to cling on to you in some way, right? Now that you have it, now that you were given the key, right? You're looking at it, then you shifted your perception and your pentacles became isolating. You're like, why are they attaching to me? Why is this anxiety here? Why is this fear here? Like, what are you clinging, what are you clinging out of fear? What's your fear, you know? And so letting go, right? Letting go of the stinking thinking here, you know, um, and also, just, looking at your relationships, right? Um, your resources, um, so then, um, we move into the Four Swords here. Uh, so the Four Swords here is like rest, right? Um, so Spirit is saying, you know, take a rest, let yourself do less, maybe to receive more, right? Um, Maybe this is a time to reflect, right? In stillness. These birds just kind of laying there. Um, and so kind of reflecting that. And but also if you see here, you have a window, right? And you got some birds here and you got your swords here. So maybe maybe having to or spirits asking you to isolate, right? Because sometimes when you isolate, sometimes when you take a rest, right? When you reground yourself, you start glean, glean, uh, gaining clarity. You start seeing things differently. And so, you know, before we couldn't see, and then we had to ask Spirit, and then Spirit kind of showed us, and we had to listen to our intuition. And then we were given that gift, and then we had to shift. And then, you know, our fears, we get scared, when we start shifting, right? We get scared when when things start coming in anew, and sometimes we just need to stop and take a rest and then come at it from a different, right? Come at it with more clarity. And then you go into the Eight of Feathers here. And the Eight of Feathers is, kind of like that. It says courage and solution. So, so Spirit is telling you to stop, right? Stop that mental loop, you know. The Eight of Feathers is like the Eight of Swords. So your self-doubt, maybe overthinking, you know, the Eight of Swords, right? Um, in the original tarot, the Eight of Swords, it's the person's kind of like surrounded by the swords and um, is im put themselves in that imprisonment, right? So um Spirit is telling you, like don't don't self-doubt, don't overthink, don't create prison, imagine invisible invisible prison for yourself, it's um time to uh liberate yourself from beliefs that no longer serves you, um you know, because right here you took rest, right? And now you're probably able to see your swords, these Eight of Swords in clarity. And so that's why, you're liberating yourselves from old beliefs, that don't, that are no longer needed in your life, right? Um, and then you have the Three of Wands here. And the Three of Wands is, a pause, right? Um, a rest, inner alignment, right? Um, also, you know, uh, maybe, right? So this is you right here, and you're kind of isolating and um, kind of like uh, realigning your inner, right? Because you took a rest here. Then you saw all the Eight of Feathers here. You're looking at it. And so maybe you took, you know, three of them and created this triangle. And um, in jiu-jitsu, the triangle is very effective, right? It's you're not going to break that triangle. If you're doing a move and you have that triangle, it's not going to be break. It's not going, nothing can come in and take it down unless you make one of the side of the triangle weak. That's the only way you can take down. That's the only way you can take down your opponent is weaken one of the sides of your triangle. And so jiu-jitsu is kind of like that, like um, uh, has that strength. The triangle is unbreakable. So realigning your inner, your inner being, um, because this is a new right here, this little space here, right? We talked about space up here. And see here all the colors with the temperance is now here, You created a little space for it, like I created a little space for these so we can enjoy the flowers. So that's how I look at this Three of Wands. So we have the Hierophant, the Hangman, the Four of Pentacles, the Four of Swords, and the Eight, right? The Eight of Feathers. And it's like, if you look at it, um, it's like your mind, right? Your mind is unbinding itself, right? If you look at, these, your mind. Hold on, I have to let my cat in. I'm sorry about that. My cat um is banging at the door and it was annoying. I couldn't take it anymore. And so anyways, there was a little disruption there. So here, right? Realigning, getting um what do you that? um, releasing, right? Releasing old, releasing the outer attachment, right? You're releasing all these attachments. Somewhere attachments came onto you, created, you know, fear, anxiety, and so now you know, with this energy, you're learning how to release it, um, and you're going within, right? And you're being still, right? You're taking a rest to realign your truth, to see your truth. So we are, you know, we're coming to a place where we're releasing, right? Um, Releasing, uh, allowing, um, allowing death, right, to come in some way. So, um, it's kind of my intake of what I see. And then the three of wands, of course, you're ready, spirit scene, even though probably, right, looks like little bandages, because this is probably not, this doesn't look or feel like an easy process to go through, getting out of the monk, right? First, starting the spark, right? Starting your seed, right? Learning how, right, where you want it to go, having a tower, then you open the gate and all this, kind of chaos energy, and now putting it to the test, um, getting that, you know, getting guidance, right? And so it's kind of tough now. And then you get to the three of wands here, spirits, telling you, hey, you're ready, you know, your eyes are different, right? Because you looked at things from a different perception. And so, your expansion is coming within, right? So we get to kind of see how the colors start coming in, right? Here, they were like isolating themselves, this pentacles didn't want to mix with that pentacles, that pentacles didn't want to go with that pentacles, but they were all tied in because of you, and then you're like, man, I gotta take a rest. I gotta meditate, I gotta, you know, get my clarity and my focus back, and then understanding, and seeing those feathers for what it is, and then taking, three of them. Oh, I could use this feather, I could use this feather, and I could use this feather, tie them up, and then create my inner being, my inner healing, right? Um, my uh my inner alignment, you know. Um, Finding that foundation, right? The triangle. And then, just, opening, spiritual contact, inviting inward to come in, and stabilizing the energy, right? And revealing, the mental, you know, the mental binding that that were holding you back, and then releasing it, right? And then if you see, um, oh, let's see, where, oh, and if you see, I was going to say, I know I saw the three of wands, so you have the three of wands here too, and they're completely different. These wands are not tied up together, and now they're tied together. So, um, the three of wands, appears again, and now it's like, you know, you know, you're, you know, this is earned, right? You earn this inner wisdom now. you know. Before it was, learning you know, how to how to get the inside, right? Your inner, how to get the inner within you to align, to have alignment to what you want to build, right? Because you got the colors here too. And instead of being isolated, you're bringing them together. So that's what I kind of see for that, just far the reading, and just having acceptance, and asking Mouse Spirit, and then, you're talented and amazing. And then we have the Mother of Pentacles, the Four of Cups, the Tower, right? Uh, Justice, the Ten of Cups, and the Ace of Pentacles. So the Mother of Pentacles, right? She prioritizes her well-being. Um, she creates sacred, she has her routines, right? Um, because she's the mother. Uh, so she, the pentacles, right? Um, she, what do you call that? She tends to her body. She tends to her space, and she nurtures, her emotional sacred place, right? And so there's some sort of spirits calling you to nourish what sustains you and roots you in strength, right? Because that's what we want with that's what we're trying to create here with the three of wands here. And now we're finding in our body and our space and our emotional space, our spiritual space. We're learning how to ground, right? We're learning how to prioritize, right? Um, our well-being, you know, the things that we do routinely, we're finding sacredness in it. We're finding the small things, we're using that mouse spirit and we're accepting things, things that we cannot change. And if you look, here's the green and kind of like the purple, and this is like the green and the purple. So, you know, it's uh, maybe, you know, the body, right? Nourishing the body, loving yourself, giving, giving yourself strength, encouraging yourself, talking to yourself, using this mother energy. And then we have the Four of Cups here. Um, and the Four of Cups, you know, um, some sort of stagnation, some sort of emotional, right? The cups being emotional, some sort of stagnation um, is, you know, because you're trying to nourish your mind, your body, your space, your emotion, right? And sometimes it can put us in a stagnation of allowing our mind to be clouded, and not being able to see what spirit is trying to offer you. If you can see, here, right? If the red, you know, and then the red, right? The fire, the red, the flowers, you know, all these red in here. Spirit, is trying to give you something, but you have your back turn towards it. You're connected in some way, but your mind is somewhere else, you know. And so there's a stagnation of some sort, um, not allowing you to see, And so maybe you just need to look again, right? With this energy, disconnect, um, um, the disconnection, spirit saying just because you're disconnected right at this moment doesn't mean that you're going to lose that gift, that opportunity, right? Because if you're working towards an opportunity and if you didn't see it, believe me, spirit's going to come in and you know, see if you can see it again, right? So, maybe it was maybe you couldn't see it, right? That junk drawer. And then you couldn't see it among the grass because you haven't mowed, right? But you're listening into your intuition, and then, spirit drops it, and you're like in disbelief. And you're like, well, if I hang upside down, right, then maybe I can see you know, this gift in a different perception, right? In a different way. And when you do, right, the yellow's in here, it scares you know, scares emotions in four different directions, right? Um, and creates isolation, and then taking a break and, looking at it and then bandaging, what three, right? These three swords here, you took it because for some reason, you know, or maybe it was this sword, that started. And then you're like, I have three more, but I don't know which one to take. And then this, eight of feathers, showed you all the eight of feathers. And you're like, okay, well, I can take that sword and put this sword together and then trying to bring in that mother energy, right? Trying to allow yourself to nourish yourself. Sometimes it's hard, when you're in a space of, you know, trying to clean up that junk drawer. It's hard to love yourself. It's hard to see that. And so, so maybe with the Four of Cups, that's kind of what you're doing. You're disconnecting, you know, and and spirit saying, "Hey, yeah, just because you're you're disconnected doesn't mean that I'm going to take that away. I'm just probably going to allow you to be in the space of stagnation. You're just going to be here for a moment until you want to turn, right? And when you turn, right, and you redirect yourself, right? And then spirit says, "I'll make you turn," and throws a tower in. And that what makes you turn, right? So now the tower comes in and disrupts everything, right? It makes things, you know, crumble. Um, it no longer holds truth in your life, Now you have to let it fall regardless, right? You gain clarity, you start seeing like, oh, okay. Spirit's funny that way, Um, and then, right, after you've will finally see, because spirit's going to get your attention. And so now with this tower, spirit got your attention. And now the energy of justice comes in, right? And you're like, okay, what is out of balance here? What am I supposed to be nourishing that I'm not even looking at? That now I have to release everything, right? And um and and now with the justice, finding I got to find balance in my alignment, right? In um, you know, I need to be accountable for this tower. Okay, so how do I rebuild my tower? How do I rebuild the foundation, Um, so this is kind of like a uh, karmic recalibration, right? So, um, you're finding justice in your in truth and clarity, right? And then we have the Ten of Cups here. And the Ten of Cups energy is emotion, right? The cups being emotion. And you reach some sort of fulfillment in your life. It's not perfect, right? If you look at all the cups up here, they're all different. They're not all the same cups. So you're like, you know what? I found balance in this tower. Um, and it's not perfect, but I reached my Ten of Cups. I reached, um, I'm inviting myself to be joyful, you know, um, you know, joy is what joy is uh how you gain joy is by nourishing it, right? So you're nourishing your Ten of Cups, you're finding joy, your spirits brought, you took accountability and now you're in peace. You so um, you know, spirit is saying you earned it, you know. Um, it's not perfect. You allowed yourself, to get to this Ten of Cups without shame, right? And maybe, maybe that the fear, one of these fears was shame, you know. And shame can put guilt, it can put a lot of other things in our lives. And so yeah, so it's not perfect, but you're happy, you're peaceful, you found truth and clarity, you made things aligned, but they're not, you know, um and you're enjoying yourself, with the Ten of Cups. And then you end your tarot reading here with the Ace of Pentacles, Aries. And this is just, the beginning of your bloom, right? You found the Ace of Pentacles, It's not spirit pushing it up from the ground. You have it in your hand now. Or spirit is giving it to you. But say this is your hand. Because if you look at this hand looks like um it looks like it's, you know, rough, it's dirty, it's went through some hard work and stuff. Um, so yeah, uh, you're you found your pentacles, Aries, um, you found a new path, you found your new project, right? Because we were creating some sort of project of some sort, a home, a way of living, Um, so that's what I see. And with the Mother of Pentacles, the Four of Cups, and then the Tower again. And the Justice is just, nourishing the real, what's real to you. Um, and also, right, um, this tower is completely different from this tower. And I would say this second tower is more internal, right? Because, if you look at the building, the inside is burning inside. So it's what I see is it's more internal, really. Um, and justice, here finding that balance and recentering your heart, you're recentering your decision, right? And then the Ten of Cups with the Ace of Pentacles, there's that material rebirth, right? Um, uh, this is the end of your reading, you know, joy and potential, right? So you have joy and potential here. Um, having, you know, having tested, right? Your, spirits testing, you know, right? With the justice here, that balance. And so spirit, um, testing your structure. Did it crumble? Did it fall down? No, it just burn your insides, And and so now, having that tested, right? Um, trust trust that, whatever this pentacle in is, right? Trust that the new soil, you know, um, you will trust the new soil that you put this in, right? Because this soil, you couldn't see anything. Spirit had to come and help you, you know? And now you found it, and you're like, you got the seed, and now you just gotta trust the soil that you're gonna put your seed in, so that way, whatever you're trying to grow here, expand, it can grow healthy. It can grow into those flowers. So, you have the two towers, he- s- just because the towers, I don't want them to seem so dramatic, Yeah, sometimes we have to have a collapse, but it doesn't mean that, just because something falls doesn't mean that it failed, right? It just means that it wasn't, you know, the foundation wasn't healthy. And so now we have, spirit is helping us create that healthy foundation, right? And then you have the three, the three of wands, you have two of them, and so you're scanning, right? You're looking at the horizon, you know, twice. So you're looking at it, here you're standing there looking at the horizon. Here, you're looking within, right? So you're kind of, seeing the desires and your wisdoms, So maybe one was does, one once maybe looking or yeah, looking at this horizon once with desire, right? And then looking at this one with um wisdom, So you looking at it from two different views. And you have two different towers with two different, you know, different ways of affecting in your life, in your journey. And then you have the Ace of Pentacles, right? Where's the other one? Right. One and two. And this Ace of Pentacles is spirit pushing it up. And then this one, you went and dug it out, out of the ground. So, the seed is offered to you, you through this chaos and try not to look at it. And then, spirit's offering it to you, or you had to dig it up, and it wasn't easy to get to this ace of, um, Ace of Cups here. So, um, yeah, so you have you have broken open something, right? And choosing some sort of, and then surrendering, right? Surrendering, and then you know, surrendering from, whether it's an action or um meditation, right? Excuse me. And now you're creating um, you know, going through this, right? Healing your fears and stuff, and now you're creating without fear, without forcing something. You're allowing space, right? You're giving space to your seeds, right? You're clearing space. Um, you're uh, letting go of um, all the negativity, is getting kind of weeded out. And so, um, yeah, and you're having acceptance and you're learning to accept, Sometimes we cannot change the things that we go through, but we can accept them and say, okay, well, why was this, why was I feeling fear? Or, why does this look so chaotic, But you can always change it, and sometimes you can't change it. You just have to accept it, like for instance, you can't change how people look at you, how they talk about you, but you can say something, right? I don't like how you talk about me. And start from something small like that, like um and just have acceptance because you're talented, Aries, and you're freaking amazing. And sometimes, people don't like that. And so, sometimes those energies are like spider webs, the junk drawer, you know, they cause us to isolate, um, and they drain our energy, and we have to bandage, and make a stronger foundation. And yeah, we have to have a couple of towers in our lives to, really see, you know, our path, what is given to us by creator, by the DN, by, you know, the whatever entity, your spirits. And so, um, Aries, I just want to say thank you. That is your reading. And I just want to say Ahihat and Wajona has clean. Wajona has clean. Wajona has clean. Wajona has clean. Ahihat.